Hey guys, it's Kat and I am back on my bed today in my boring bedroom with good lighting to talk about eyeshadow palettes. So this is my March check-in for my project Armageddon or Eyemageddon series where I am trying to use or test out a lot of my eyeshadow palettes this year, and each month I'm going to sort of declutter any that I don't instantly enjoy. So this is not going to be a full review of these products. I'm not going to try every shade and analyze all the color stories and da-da-da. I'm just going to give you my gut reaction of, do I need this? Do I like this? Will I keep it? Yes or no? And show you some looks that I created throughout the month. So I am doing this in themed months. So this month is actually going to be Too Faced, where I tried out all my Too Faced palettes. But in the next coming months, I'm going to have various different brands, maybe some luxury eyeshadows, some indie eyeshadows, some sort of like mini palettes or quads or quints. I've sort of created some categories for the rest of the year as a way to sort of, group these and make it a bit easier on myself. So like I said, I tested my Too Faced eyeshadow palettes. I've only got 6, which might sound like a lot to some people, but I actually had quite a lot more. Over the last few years, I've either decluttered, given away, or my toddler has destroyed. He destroyed the rainbow one. It's desirable to toddlers, rainbow looking eyeshadow palettes. So yeah, over the last few years, my collection probably went from maybe like 10 or 11 to 6. So this is a lot smaller than what it used to be, but these are the ones that I sort of wanted to try again. And there's something about them that I keep going back to, so that's what I wanted to try this month. So I'm going to start by talking about this format of eyeshadow palette, which was started by the chocolate bar palette. This is actually the original one. They did make it a lot slimmer and put like names underneath the pans after they had this run. This is the original first release. But after this was popular, they released, I think there was 4 in this series. I did actually own them all, but I decluttered 2 of them. I did keep the gold because I love the gold. I gave it a really good review. I also kept the Sweet Peach, which is still around, still available. And I also have the limited edition holiday release, the Gingerbread Spice. They brought out a few other ones in the years after, but this was, I think, the first one in this sort of format in the holiday releases anyway. All right, let's start with the original. Now I can tell you that, oh look, I've gone back to testing this, like I've had this for so many years. All right, you can see the bright blue leggings that I'm currently wearing. Anyway, this palette is super duper old, and to be fair, if you were doing makeup on anyone else, this should be like thrown out years and years and years ago. But because I just do makeup on myself, and because this actually hasn't changed, it hasn't changed texture, hasn't changed smell, still has that really sweet sugary smell to it, which the chocolate bar palettes were known for. And there, the texture, the finishes, everything is performing really well. So I don't think this is off. It's probably well past its shelf life and use by date, but it's still performing really, really well for quite an old palette. This is, look, I like this palette because it's so easy to use. They're not super bold, they're not super pigmented, they're more subtle eyeshadows, but I feel like what was successful about this, not only is there some really nice sort of like one and done, easy to use shades, like this gold, beautiful on its own. I think I did a look with this brown down here. It's gorgeous. It's definitely a brown that I would wear often. I think I did a look with this shade here as well. So there's some really nice basic shades that a lot of people can wear on a daily basis. And also because they aren't too pigmented and they're very easy to blend, I feel like this is a really good sort of beginner formula. You're not gonna sort of overdo it and look a bit clownish. It's very, very, very easy to use. The limitations I have with this palette is that it's a very sort of one note. The colors are quite muted, which I'm fine with, but the finishes, like all the shimmers, are quite subtle. They're very, very sort of, they're not a satin finish, they're definitely a shimmer, but they just, yeah, they're very, very subtle. And there are some differences in finish, like this one is like a matte with sparkle, this one's like a matte with even more sparkle. I didn't even use those because they're not something that I tend to wear. But you sort of get a really subtle shimmer or a matte out of this. So it gives you the same finish on the eye. You can't really elevate a look with different finishes too much. So it is very limiting. If this palette was just that part there, I would keep it in a heartbeat. But I don't really reach for most of these shades. What I have noticed about trying the palettes in this series anyway, like this format, is there's like 1 or 2 or 3 shades that makes me want to keep the whole palette, but in reality, I don't need to keep the whole thing. So yeah, like I said, if it was just this little part here, that would be such a good everyday palette. But I definitely don't need at least half of this. So this is a pretty standard, basic, boring palette, but it is so good just to throw on like one shimmer, blend it out really quickly, and you can do your makeup in like literally 30 seconds and it looks good. So it's such a basic, user-friendly palette for just every day. And that's what I'm finding it hard to like get rid of this. So what I'm going to do after I talk about all the other palettes in this format, I'm going to tell you which ones I'm going to keep, which ones I'm going to get rid of, because I'm still sort of struggling with it. The next one I'm going to talk about is the chocolate gold. So this was, I think, the 4th version. No, maybe the 5th, because there's a white chocolate, wasn't there? This is very different. It still has the same format of like the little pans and then the 2 giant pans, which I don't like that format. I feel like the giant pans aren't shades that I use any more than the other pans. So I think it's a little bit useless having the big pans. But one thing I have to say about this formula is it is completely different to this one. The mattes are very similar. They're not super, super bold, but they're quite easy to apply, quite easy to blend. So we've got 4 shades here. There's like a big cream, there's like a transition shade, a darker brown, and a black. So they're pretty standard shades. And then all the rest are this really intense metallic formula or sparkly formula. So it's very different to this one, which is very subdued in the texture. What I love about this palette though, is that you can get that beautiful metallic bold look, which you can't get in the original palette. And it's so easy to create a pretty stunning look by putting one color all over the lid, sort of building it up so it's nice and opaque, and then using 1 or 2 of these shades in the corner just to finish off the look. I think it's gorgeous. So even though I don't need all of these shades, I really like the formula. And the more I use it, the more I'm like, I like this formula. It's not every day for me. Sometimes I want subdued, sometimes I want bold, but I think it's a really fun palette. All right, the next palette is the very, very hyped Sweet Peach palette. This like was going to be limited edition, but it sold so well and sold out everywhere that they had to bring it back permanently. This does smell like peach, and it still does, so it's got a nice scent to it. It is a better format in my opinion. It doesn't have those big pans that not everyone's gonna use a lot. So I much prefer this, the format with the same size pans. Now this was so hyped and I didn't get it. I think this is quite a muted sort of muddy palette. So even though there are a couple of peaches, it's majority brown, a majority sort of cream tones, some dark shades. Yes, this is really basic, and again, probably similar to the chocolate bar palette, this is very wearable for a lot of people. There are definitely some shades that perform a lot better than others. Like this is a matte peach with a bit of sparkle. This is like a dark purple with purple sparkle, and it's just not very good. But I do have to say the shimmers here, I feel like they're a little bit more intense than the original chocolate bar palette. So these are a little bit more bold on the eye, and there are some gorgeous colors. Like this one up here this is called Luscious. It is stunning. This is such a stunning like champagne shade. It's not too light, but it's just, look at that. Look at that, two-faced, what? In contrast, actually, I'm gonna take a shade from the original chocolate bar. I'm gonna go with sort of a similar color just in there. Original chocolate bar is this one. So you can see one is a lot more shiny and bold, and one looks all right, but it's a little bit more powdery and just a little bit more dull. It's not as sort of shiny and refined. And let's take this one down here because again, it's sort of like a cool tone gold, probably the closest in color. And if we compare that, it is super metallic. There you go. So I might zoom in so you can see the difference there, but it really does highlight that they have different formulas, and I feel like they're all good for different occasions. So Sweet Peach, chocolate bar, and chocolate gold, and you can definitely see what I'm talking about with the differences of intensity. Anyway, so I went into trying this being like, it's going to be decluttered because I haven't used this for years. I don't really see the great things about it, but I have to say that I have discovered some really nice one and done eyeshadows. Like this shade here is also really beautiful. It's like a lemony sort of color, but it has a cool tone shift. Really, really beautiful, just as like a really subtle, hang on, I'll put it here, just as a really subtle sort of shimmer. Like it's quite sheer, but it gives just a beautiful little like slight highlighted effect. So really nice for just an everyday look. So yeah, the more I sort of play with this, the more I've discovered some really nice everyday but nice quality basic nudes for me. And they mainly are like these shimmers here. I feel like the mattes aren't that impressive. They're okay, but I don't feel like they're as blendable as maybe the ones in the chocolate bar palette. They're fine, they work, they're quite subtle. If you want to build them up, you can, but they're just average mattes, but the shimmers are really pretty. Last palette in that sort of format is the Gingerbread Spice, and realistically, look, this is much more of a mixed formula palette, and some are good shades and some are duds. They have some of the metallics here that are very similar to the Chocolate Gold. I think this came out the same year as the Chocolate Gold or the year after, so that's a very sort of familiar formula. It's got this gorgeous duochrome, and I actually wore this in a video recently, my last video. It's gorgeous. It's a vibrant pink, but you can see hopefully in the mirror it has a shift to gold. So I was wearing this and I had got compliments, people like, your eyeshadow is mesmerizing. It is such a beautiful eyeshadow. So this is definitely the thing that I reach for this palette for. This is definitely the case of I'm keeping it for one eyeshadow, but there are some nice shades in here. They're just not any different from like the other palettes or anything else I have. They're pretty standard. I remember the pink and the orange working quite well. I didn't test it this month, but I do remember when I reviewed this, they created quite a nice look, but they're not shades I reach for too often. And there's a shade over here called Frostbite Me, which is like a really chunky shimmer, and it's just chunky and nasty, and like I'm sure some people would love it and make it work, but it is just like you put your brush in and you try to rub your brush and it just brings up chunks. So there's some things in here that are complete duds and there's other things that are like complete gems. So yeah, I need to decide what I'm going to do with this palette. I wasn't planning on doing this for every video, and I don't want to do this every video. I just want to declutter things and use what I like and get rid of what I don't like. But because these all have shades that I like and then other shades that I don't like, I'm actually thinking of customizing my own palette again. So I did this with my Pat McGrath palettes last month, and I think I'm gonna have to do it again with my Too Faced palettes. So what I'm thinking of doing is pulling apart these three palettes and taking all the shades out, arranging them into a palette that I actually will use a lot of. If I can't make a full palette out of these, what I might do is pull apart this one as well. This is the palette I like most of the shades from. So if I don't need to delve into some of these shades to make a complete palette, so I'm thinking maybe keeping something like the Sweet Peach format and just popping out every single shade in every single palette and then creating my custom palette. If I don't have enough shades to fit all of this, I might pull apart the Chocolate Gold. So I am going to film the process. So if you want to see how I depot these and also what shades I've decided to keep, I will have that video up either next or the video after that. So it'll be up very soon. Then when it comes to these last two palettes, these are a lot easier for me. I'm going to keep them both. I'll talk about the Born This Way Natural Nudes first. This is the one I'm currently wearing. I really like this palette. It's a different formula to the Chocolate Bar and the, what is it, Sweet Peach and the whatever. This is different. It looks a bit messy, but it's really, really beautiful. So what I love about this palette is that it has been inspired by their foundation range, and there's sort of a shimmer and a matte, shimmer, matte that is supposed to work on all skin tones. Look, realistically, that's annoying because if only this section works for your skin tone, what's the point of having all of this? So yeah, the theory behind that is a little bit funny. I don't think it really works in practice, but what I do think they've created is a really nice nude palette that has a whole bunch of different undertones and goes from light to dark. So this is sort of like a comprehensive nude palette. Now, again, this is limited with texture. There's half mattes, half shimmers. The shimmers are either chunky, sparkly, but not as bad as that one in the Gingerbread Spice palette. It's not as sort of chunky and gross as that. So yeah, some of them are sort of more sheerer shades that have more of a twinkle on the eye, like the one I'm wearing today. I'm wearing this combo, which is more of like a peachy light combination. It's really pretty. Or you start getting into more metallic formulas that are a little bit like the chocolate gold. So these are a lot more bold and a lot more punchy. Now with the mattes, I find these to be a lot more blendable and less dry feeling than the ones in the Sweet Peach. And what I like about this palette is that since I've got the pairings that work really well, it's so easy to create a 2 eyeshadow look like without thinking. So if you want something a little bit more mauvey, you go for that and blend it out with that. If you want something peachy like I'm wearing today, you use this one. If you want something more pink, you use that one. If you want something more gold, you use that one. Something more chocolate brown, use that one. So it's really easy to structure a look if you're not really confident pairing colors. And of course you can jump to different colors. You can use whatever you want, but I just feel like it's such a good basic palette. The only thing I think they could have done to make this like a lot better would be to have had 3 shades that complement. So maybe a satin in the middle, because these are very bold. Like if you had more of a satin sort of caramel gold shade here, so if you didn't want such a reflective bold effect, like these are pretty full on, it would have made this a little bit more versatile. You could have, yeah, bold, subtle, and then the matte to pair it with. I think that would have been awesome, but as it is, I really like this palette. The only thing that's a little bit annoying is some of the sort of flaky shades, but as soon as you put them on the lid, they don't look flaky and chunky. They do just give it a bit of a twinkle. Also because the shimmers are quite bold, I sometimes get a bit of sparkle migration. So I'll zoom in and show you the look I'm wearing now, and it is with probably the chunkier shade in the palette, and I can see some like shimmer that's wanting to like go up my brow bone, but it's pretty. It's a nice everyday look, and with 2 shades, it was really simple to create. So you can see how twinkly that is, but you can see how the shimmer sort of transfers a little bit. I did pat a little bit on with my finger, so maybe it didn't stick completely, so it sort of started moving up a little bit, but it's a pretty look and really easy to achieve. So yeah, I feel like this is quite an underrated palette. I just feel like it's so easy to use, and one that if I had out on my desk often, I will just keep reaching for it because it just creates really nice everyday looks. All right, now the last one I want to talk about is this. This is the Natural Lust palette, which is, it was a limited edition and it came out after the Natural Love palette. This I really like. Look, do I need everything in it? No. Is it too big? Yes. But I really like this. So this is a much bigger palette than I usually like to reach for. But I sort of like this for a similar reason to why I like the Born This Way Natural Nudes palette. This obviously has more textures, not actually that many textures. They're all, again, sort of matte and that quite intense shimmer. Some of them are a little bit more subtle, some of them a little bit more sparkly, some of them a little bit more sheer, but overall it's just matte and shimmer. But what I do like about it is you can just go based on row and pick a few shades and create a really nice look. So you've got more of a pinky row, more of a goldy greeny row with a nice sort of warm bronze. This is more of a warmer toned nude. Then you get into more sort of brick tones and more cooler tones. So I just find this to be a little bit more complicated than the natural nudes, but I love the tones in here. Of course, like I can get rid of the pink, I can get rid of some of the shades in here, but I really like these sort of mid-tone nudes, and I like the golds, I like the oranges, I like the reddy sort of shades, and I love the cool tones. These cool tones, they're beautiful. So even though I don't need all of this, I do like the quality of it and I do like the looks I get out of it. So I tend to reach for this a lot when I want to create more sort of cooler tone looks, because these are beautiful, flattering shades. But overall, I think the quality is really nice. And I got this half price and I don't regret it. I think it's a really nice palette. And yeah, even though it's not one I pull out too often because it's not that big, but it's, in the scheme of things, it's a bigger palette. I still really like it. So I'm going to keep this. All right, so after testing all these palettes in March, I'm definitely keeping these 2 as they are. And then I might be compressing these into one palette, or one palette and keeping the chocolate gold. We'll see in the next video how I go. But if I can get the 6 down to 3, I think I'd actually be happier with that split. But I also don't want to destroy the chocolate gold just because it's a very nice palette. So yeah. The next video will reveal how I go with these. One thing I do want to mention about this month though is that I've come to realize that I do quite like Too Faced eyeshadows. I feel like they're hit and miss in terms of their holiday eyeshadows. Oh, that's another thing. I had holiday palettes that I got rid of. So I did have holiday palettes from like holiday sets that I did declutter, I think when I moved house. So I actually had quite a lot more than what I thought I had with Too Faced, but I have culled it down quite a bit and will cull it down even more. But one thing that's strange about Too Faced, like they were really popular about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. Like their palettes were the palettes to have. And I think at the time the quality was really good, but then as eyeshadows have evolved, I think some of their palettes are still good and the formulas are still really good for just everyday basic wear. But I think they've also released some things that were real duds, and that's usually in their holiday collections, like their box packs with the little palettes. Those tend to be subpar formula, and I think it's really put people off buying Too Faced. But where I think Too Faced is at their best is where they release permanent products. Like I think this might have been discontinued since, but when they release permanent products, I feel like they put more effort into the formula. But when they sort of hype up limited edition things, I feel like their formula just isn't as good. So I still like Too Faced. I still will give them a go, but I understand why people have sort of gone off them because they're not consistent, is what I'm trying to get at. All right, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to start gouging out some eyeshadows and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.